Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is Aaron Trevino here. We have another wonderful guest. We have Dan from Eugene, Oregon. How you doing today, Dan?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I know we've been in touch for a little bit. Really like your content on Instagram, and it's great to finally connect.
I appreciate it. It's always the pleasure is all mine.
Yes, sir, definitely. So Dan, for those of us who aren't too familiar with you, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, definitely. My name is Dan Gandee. I am a licensed real estate broker. I'm an active investor. I'm also the VP of growth at a company called Liftoff Agent, who's a real estate technology and positioning agency for hundreds of real estate agents. And then, avid gardener and explorer and somebody who likes to get out in the wild and enjoy everything Oregon and the Pacific Northwest has to offer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it kind of comes with the terrain, right? I mean, if you're living in the Pacific Northwest, you may as well be a gardener and enjoy everything out there, right?
It's totally true. I think my house is right at the base of some mountains, and like as soon as you go outside, you can see pretty much mountains in 360 degrees. So it's pretty sweet. It's a cool place to live.
Beautiful. Yeah, I know we'd spoken about it earlier, Dan, but I've been to different, regions, different parts of the country, but never the Pacific Northwest. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what's unique about that part of the country?
Definitely. I think the most unique thing about this part of the country is that there's a sense of independence and kind of your don't tread on me type of mentality, similar to Texas would be the best analogy. So you got an eclectic mix of cultures and people, but quite different than California, right? California is only 4 or 5 hours south of us. And California has its own micro, economies and, cultures, but I think what really separates Oregon and Washington from the rest is that there's really this sense of independence, a lot of entrepreneurship here that's not just focused on tech, where tech and entertainment, I think, is kind of California's bread and butter for innovation. And I think Oregon is more or less, a place of innovation, a place where people come to, kind of get away from everybody, but also be connected. And I think the only final frontier is Alaska, right? But the Alaska just doesn't have the economy like it does we have here, and that's why we've seen such explosive growth, both in Eugene, but also Portland market and Seattle market over the last 10 years. So, pretty rad place to live.
Yeah, no, I would imagine, Dan. And you touched on something interesting. I forgot the way you worded it, but you said something like, people are wanting to get away, but yet wanting to still be part of something.
Yep. Yeah. It's I think it's because our beach and our coastal towns aren't really your quasi what you think of in the movie as a beach town. So I think people move more inland here, and they live about the mountains. They live about getting out on the weekends and exploring. And I think that disconnects. I lived in the Silicon Valley for 10 years, right? It's a 7-day-a-week type of mentality there, where here it's a Monday through Friday. And, I'm not saying that I don't work 7 days a week, but most people, if you contact them on Saturday and Sunday, you're not getting a call till Monday afternoon. So people enjoy it here.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's I guess that's the quintessential, work-life balance differences between, I guess, different parts of the country.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
and I'm curious about you, Dan. Did you grow up in Oregon, or did you know you wanted to be in real estate, at a young age?
It's a great question. To give you the brief version of all of it, I grew up in just a middle-class family in Ohio. My grandfather was a asphalt contractor and a small-time landlord with just a few rentals. And I spent time, digging trenches and fixing windows and doing random stuff with him at a really young age, and just getting a glimpse of real estate. And I just think I used to ride in the school bus. This is kind of a weird story, but I used to ride in the school bus and always sit at the window seat, and I would look at every property. Didn't matter what it was. I was always just obsessed with real estate and property. But fast forward, worked in construction as an estimator, built a pretty successful construction company in the Silicon Valley. worked in plants and nursery and horticulture and sales for that. But all of that was always related to some aspect of the construction trade and real estate. And I have a bachelor's degree in advertising. So it was always this complex mix of somebody who could market, but also had a driving passion for real estate. So I actually really got my kick in career in real estate is when I was working with a construction company. One of our partners was a multifamily owner. And we started doing a lot of design build. As that started to peak, I got recruited by a top 100 brokerage in the country. I think they do about $500 million in real estate now, as his director of operations. And that's really where I like told myself I would never become a real estate agent, because I saw the 7 days a week, the grind, the hustle. And I liked my Monday through Friday, occasional Saturday work, and still can make good money. But as I transitioned into an investor, I realized real quick that a lot of the real estate agent experience that I was getting or being provided, especially out of state, just wasn't up to my standards. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go get my license and I'm going to niche down. I'm going to work with investors and I'm going to work with downsizers and relocation, because I've done it 3 times. And that's really what me and my business partner did. Was we started a real estate brokerage, and it's like 80 to 85% investors and about 10% listings and downsizers and about 5% relocation. So it's been pretty successful there.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Dan. And what I find so interesting is that after all of your experience, kind of the impetus or maybe the beginning of this, it almost sounds like it all started when you were a kid, right? You were kind of seeing the asphalt, you were seeing maybe the different properties when you're driving down the street, and it kind of seems like those early experiences kind of meshed into what you're doing today.
It's really I think those life experiences, I think this is one of the biggest takeaways from what I can tell people, is that there's these brief segments of memory that you have that you remember as an adult or adolescent that are tying you back to a passion or a direction you should go to. And some people acknowledge that, some people accept that, or some people like put it in a recycling bin and kind of, that's great, but I'm not going to chase that dream. And I think I just kept on playing denial with myself, that I was like, I want to get involved in real estate. I want to get involved in real estate, but I don't want to be, your flashy HGTV, working 7 days a week and having to wear flashy clothes and drive expensive cars type real estate. I want to work with something that I fall in love with. And that's when I started buying rental properties, and especially in state and out of state, that I realized that I was good at negotiation and I was good at finding deals and being able to structure a lot of owner financing and creative financing stuff. So it all came from a passion, but I kind of stumbled into it by following that idea. So
yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, you kind of talked about, your grandpa being a small time landlord, kind of the middle class background, the middle class upbringing, not wanting to be this, big fancy HGTV guy. And it, kind of transitioning into what you're doing today. And I'm curious as well, you talked about denial, what maybe part of yourself do you think you were denying that you later discovered?
yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think most of it had to do with my independence. I was always entrepreneur focused, but I never wanted to be tied to like a team leader or team broker that told me like, this is how it goes and this is what you need to do. I needed to like figure that out for myself. And I think once I made that leap, being a real estate investor, or a partner in the technology company, it was like, hey guys, like I want a piece of the pie. Like I want to have creative control. I want to be able to have, financial freedom based upon my own story or my own timeline versus, I think that's what a lot of the denial was. Like I was raised by a family that said, go to college, get a corporate job, work for people and get a retirement and pension and everything's good. But I was like the wild card in the family that basically moved to California after college with no job, my dog, my car, slept on a couch for 6 months, ended up landing a job by luck with this really successful landscape architect that built like half of Pebble Beach because he needed somebody to help him with his marketing. And like those opportunities and chances don't pop up until you start to be like, you know what, I'm not going to go the quasi status quo route. I'm going to actually take chances. And, I always say, dig yourself up and plant your roots somewhere else and take chances. And I think that's the message I always try to tell everybody, especially a lot of the people I mentor, is that until you can get past not worrying about what other people think of you and start to think about, this is my own life, I want to do it and design it my own way, and be able to complement my my attributes and my preferences of where I want to live and what I want to do. And I think that a lot of people cannot break that chain. That's why they're still living in their small town, and 5 minutes away is their parents. So not to say that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's wasn't for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's an act of faith. It's an act of courage. And it's also, you looking into the future and wanting to build something that's uniquely yours.
Yeah, it's been great. And me and my business partner, when we merged basically my investment company and his investment company, like we made one mission. It was like, create a real estate business that's focused around investors, provides great experience and knowledge, but also is like straight to the point, very raw, very real. If we're not a good client fit, that's fine, because we have other things going on. And I think that's the type of real estate agent you really need to work with in life, is the one who doesn't need the commission check, and the one that's going to give you the answers and the hard questions or discussions that are going to change your trajectory, both in investing and a first-time home buyer or seller type of scenario. If it's motivated by commissions, and this is not a knock on anybody who sells real estate full time, but when it's motivated by commissions, you need that sale to close, versus someone who doesn't need that sale to close and will tell you exactly what you don't want to hear. And that's what's made us really successful. And a lot of people respected that. So, and I can give examples of that tenfold of what's happened over the last 5 or 6 years of that specific scenario going, awry or in the right direction. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a super interesting approach, Dan. And it's, you're kind of have that dichotomy of, you needing the business versus wanting it. And then there's that infamous, commission breath, right? You can really smell it on someone when they're strictly wanting to make a sale. But for you, it sounds like, you're offering a unique product that's really so much more.
Yep. And I think, when it comes to buying investment properties, about 80 to 90% of people don't really have a thorough understanding of investment properties, macro, microeconomics, understanding valuation. Not to say that there's thousands and thousands of people, great investors out there, who say they don't need a real estate agent. But some of the biggest success that I've seen, and one thing I wanted to touch on, is that when I deal with an investor, is like, oh yeah, send me deals and then I'll do business with you. Right. I always say, oh, cool, I'll send myself those deals and then I will close them myself and hold those properties. If you don't want to work as a team and you don't want to collaborate and create a win-win client relationship, I don't have time for you. And I've found some amazing deals. Like one of our really good friends, they're on like a $400,000, $500,000 profit margin deal right now that we found from a postcard. That was my lead. And they didn't say any of those things, right? They came to me because I had expertise. They weren't sure about buying multifamily and how they should really build that type of transition. And that's what a lot of people come to us. They're like, hey, you've had experience, syndication and all these other things. How could you help us? And if you do good, we'll be a client for life.
Yeah, absolutely. I understood, Dan. And I'm sure, you even just said it. I'm sure you hear this a lot as well. We have, we have the internet, we have Redfin, we have Zillow, we have, all these different, opportunities that someone can do on their own. Why work with, with a real estate agent at all?
I love that question. That's one of my favorite questions. And I get it a lot, right? The first thing that I try to say is that having a real estate agent that has experience especially in underwriting and especially in valuation of property, is key. No matter how good of a negotiator you think, or you can plug your numbers into some bigger pockets type of calculator. I pretty much, if somebody asked me, both in the states that I invest in and the states, Oregon myself, where I'm a real estate broker, if somebody asked me the key, benchmark data, I can ring it off better than most commercial agents. Like, I know what the cap rate is. I know what the GRM, I know what the price per square foot is. I know what the price per door is. I know where there's upside. I know where there's downside. I know what type of returns you're going to get over a 5 to 10 year prop. But what am I going to share those numbers with you if you're not a client? No, I have no need to. That experience has been building a portfolio of rental properties and different, a lot of potential investors or clients will come in and they'll pick your brain for 3 months to 6 months, say they're going to buy with you. But really what they've done is they've extracted all the information that you've grown a successful portfolio with, and then they turn around and try to buy them off market. And this isn't a hate on anybody, but I try to tell everybody that that's not why you hire a real estate agent, for that reason only, right? You hire a real estate agent so you don't have to deal with the ridiculous amounts of paperwork, the ridiculous amounts of compliance. And I try to tell everybody, when you're buying properties off market and things go sideways, there is no E&O insurance. Go hire an attorney, $3,000 to $5,000 a retainer, and you'll be like $20,000 to $30,000 into a deal, and the profit was only 50 grand. So basically, there's a liability aspect to of hiring a really good real estate broker that's backed by a good legal and insurance policy. Because what people don't realize is most litigation is on the real estate side. My best friend and roommate from college is a real estate attorney. He's like, I'm amazed how much litigation is in real estate on an everyday basis. And I say, for for sale by owners or investors trying to do, different types of deal structure, or even syndication for that matter, there's a lot of liability. And I think when you overlook that and you just look at the reward, not versus the risk, that's when things go sideways. So, having the right expert, the right knowledge, good negotiation skills, good market knowledge. But to answer your question, the most important aspect of working with a really good real estate broker, especially in an area you're not familiar with, is connections. I've spent years building property management connections, contractors that will come out in a day, give you a quote, and get the work done in 2 weeks. Private money. Also a big database. I got about 480 cash buyers that are in Oregon alone. I can sell deals off market. I can sell them to institutional investors. I can send them to commercial and syndicators in LA. So when I go to list a property, I work it through a gauntlet of potential buyers before it even hits the MLS. And I think that is years of experience, years of marketing, years of email collection and data. And I think that is the biggest reason why you hire a really reputable real estate broker in a state that you're not familiar with or you are familiar with.
Yeah, definitely, Dan. And it's so interesting as well, at least around America, we're having a lot of movement, people moving, from, to different states, out of different states or whatever it may be. But it seems like one recurring theme is that everything is getting region or city specific, right? Like if you're going into one particular area, maybe there's different building codes or different nuances between the markets that you wouldn't know unless you've been there for a while, like yourself.
100%. And I had a 1031 potential client that I was working with that had taken a little bit more time than I had been comfortable with. And I had told him numerous times, do not buy in the Portland metropolitan area. I go, my experience, I have properties all over, but I was like, the laws are different in Portland Metro. You're required to pay relocation with an eviction. Your rental cap is different than the rest of Oregon, right? There's these specific things that make holding properties there easier for people who have large portfolios and liquidity and years in the business there. But somebody that's going to jump in and buy a 20 unit in Portland, I'd much rather buy a 20 unit in Salem, Eugene, or Albany, in an area where I have more flexibility to protect and value add, really. Just because the demand's there in Portland doesn't mean your cap rate and your ability to create more wealth or more flexibility for your investment business is there. And he didn't listen to a word I said and went and bought a property in Portland proper. And when he emailed me to tell me that, I didn't even respond. I just pushed delete and I deleted him from my CRM, because people just don't listen no matter what they're told. There was no financial gain for me to tell him not to buy in Portland, other than the fact that he may buy with me somewhere else, but I service the entire state. If I'm telling you as an investor myself not to buy in Portland, there's a pretty big reason why. Where other people will argue that, right? If there's other people listening here that invest in Portland all the time, that's fine. But I've seen some of the biggest investors, excuse me, I'm like coming down from a sickness that I had, that have moved all their money out of Portland, right? Invested other places. One of the biggest investors I've ever heard that's been investing there since 1968. The question, one of the bigger syndicators that I know in Portland said, would you buy in Portland now after owning multifamily, like hundreds, if not thousands of units here? He said, no, I would never buy in Portland now, knowing what I do now. And I think anybody that's listening to this should take that advice and look at other parts of Oregon or other parts of the country where there's so much more value add potential. There's so much more population growth. And it's a different type of seller that you're buying from, right? If you look at St. Louis or Charlotte, North Carolina, 5-6 years ago, right? If you were a smart investor, you're talking to mom and pop investors that own 10, 15, 20 units, and you're buying properties for 250, 350, 450. Where's Charlotte now? It's $2 million property. So really it's just knowing these things, really understanding what's going on.
Right. Yeah, definitely knowing what's going on and also kind of having that foresight, right? I mean, you even talked about Charlotte, you talked about St. Louis. And I know you'd mentioned a few names of cities, but at least for me, I'm not very familiar with Oregon. I know Eugene, University of Oregon, but what's kind of the economy like? Is it more of a rental market, or, what are kind of the areas that you would suggest investing in?
Totally. I get this question a lot. So this is kind of how Oregon breaks down. We had a SB 608 passed, I believe, 2 years ago, which caps rental rate. It was at 9.8, 9.7. Now it's 9.2. So you can only raise rents 9.2% per year. And with that, we also had a state mandated, government mandated eviction moratorium. So Oregon in general is not a huge landlord friendly state, but just because you have rental cap and you have a landlord not friendly state doesn't mean you shouldn't be investing here. Because what essentially that does is it removes everybody who's small and everyone that's big just keeps buying, right? So what I try to tell everybody here is this. If you have way more liquid capital and you want stable returns and a low cap rate, you invest in big markets, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, because you have millions of dollars of liquidity. You're probably not over leveraging and pulling tons of loans in those types of markets. Like the people buying bigger investment property there, or even duplexes at 500, 600,000, they don't match the 1% rule. They're barely a 0.5% rule. And they're buying at cap rates at like 3 and 4%. They're parking money. They're looking at it over the long term. And it's a different type of investor, right? But if you're going to invest in markets where you want to be a cash flow investor, not a long-term hold appreciation investor, you want to be a cash flow investor, you got to be investing in the cities that are seeing population growth. And that was Bend over the last 10 years. Bend has seen an explosive, like you used to be able to buy a duplex there for 250,000. It's like 650 now. And over like a 5 to 7 year period. Eugene, Springfield market, we have the U of O here. We have a ton of tech money coming here. We have a lot of people moving here from Seattle. I call it kind of the vice. We're getting pushed by the north, Portland and Seattle coming down, and then we have the Californian money coming up. So we've seen a population growth. we were in the top 20 cities of population growth. So we have like, 180 to 200,000. I could see that being 250 to 300,000 in the next 5 to 10 years. But here's the key. We have urban growth boundary, and there's not tons of new construction being put in. So you have high rental rate, and supply and demand are off. So it's a great place to pick up rentals because you're going to have that long-term and that short-term cash flow. So Albany, Salem, Eugene, Springfield, parts of Roseburg, and then Medford, Grants Pass area. Ashland's just kind of California #2, very outpriced. And basically Ashland and Bend are two markets that are really pushed up from California relocation money. And then really that's the whole, like the I-5 corridor. But to kind of give you some out-of-state perspective, I grew up in Canton, Ohio, Cleveland, from Cleveland to Pittsburgh to Indianapolis. And then you got your Nashville to St. Louis to North Carolina swath, parts of Detroit, Minneapolis, St. Paul areas are up and coming. And then we've all seen the Texas explosion. And then parts of Florida. Like those are like the hot markets that I see. I don't invest in all of those markets. I tend to invest in places I've been, where I know people and have built a network there. But that's really why I see, I think the best advice I can give anybody, either both from a real estate broker or a real estate investor side in terms of looking at different markets, is really, can you find properties with a 7 to 10 GRM, or can you find a steady acquisition of 7 to 9 cap properties? And if you can look in those specific areas, you can run the numbers really quickly and then just look at the job market there. Those are only the two things you have to really look at if you wanted to break it down to just the most simplistic form. And some of those markets are 5 to 10 GRMs, acquisition of 7 to 9 cap apartment complexes, and really just being able to create that value add.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious as well, Dan, maybe, for those of us who don't know, what exactly is GRM in this context?
So gross rent multiplier, essentially take gross rents, divide it by the sale price or the purchase price or the offering price. And if you were to pay cash without looking at expenses, taxes, insurance, PITI, debt service, how long would it take you to basically pay that off to zero? And a good investment, just benchmark number one, is 5 years, right? If you can buy a duplex and you can pay it off 100% in 5 years with those rents, those gross rents, that's a really good investment, especially if you pulled a 30-year loan. So I look at 5 to 10 being just like the magic number in terms of gross rent multiplier. Oregon it shuffles around between a 12 to 13 to 19. It's kind of like that high teens. So under 20 years, you pull a 30-year loan, you're going to be basically cash flowing a year 20. You got 10 years of pure cash flow outside of any taxes and insurance and CapEx. And then anything over a GRM over 20 is typically a California market, depending on where it is located and how high the rents are. But if you look at most of California, it's like high 18 to 25. And then new construction with brand new build costs, those are your 20 plus GRMs, because there's, it's all that rebuild cost or that new construction cost that you're basically deferring a bunch of remodeling or capital expenditures outside of repairs, small repairs that your tenants will have over time. So some of the best investments are, can you find new construction in nice areas that can rent at a 7 to 14 GRM, and then being able to look at, well, if I'm buying new construction, especially if it was built by a reputable contractor, there's probably not going to be tons of expenses outside of taxes and insurance and a little bit of management and turnover. And so that's kind of how I look at holds. And then cap rate, every market's different. So I can't give you a number to blanket across, but Eugene market's like a 4.8 to 6 cap market. Everything that's in the 6 or high 5s is typically heavy deferred maintenance or has been depreciated, and everything's been sucked out of that sponge. And they haven't put money or capital back into that investment property. California markets, like, mid 3s to maybe 5 cap market. But when it comes to fix and flip properties, right, I really try to tell everybody is, if you're looking for every $100,000 house and you're not buying from a wholesaler, you need to be buying at like 65% on 100% or $100,000 house. And that's the hardest thing about the Pacific Northwest is, if you're going to be a successful house flipper, it's really hard to find inventory, and especially an upswing market that has that type of discount. And so we have a lot of house flippers here that fail, and we have a lot of house flippers here that get into the business because they own a construction company or they have the capability of doing the work, but they're making like 10 to 15% profit margin. And then they don't understand that there's taxes on that. So they end up being mid 5 to 8 to 9% profit margin. You can't, as we all know, you need to be in at least 20K or 20% profit margin on a consistent basis to run any business.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's definitely, we're definitely feeling a bit of that here in the Texas markets as well. I mean, there are plenty of deals here, but you are seeing a trend of maybe the margins on flips reducing. And then given that we're in a housing shortage, those same people are transitioning to new construction builds.
Yep. And I think that's the hardest thing with any type of market, is that you have to play your cards right. And a lot of people I hear right now, especially buyers and investment buyers, is like, oh, I'll hold off until the market crashes. And then I'm like, cool, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. First, are you liquid? Second question is, are you going to use financing to purchase and leverage properties once the market crashes? Because if you buy at this price and then the interest rates for commercial loans go up to 6 to 7%, you're basically buying at the exact same price if you were buying now. Now, if you're a cash investor, now we can talk about, building that war chest, positioning yourself for acquisition or pre-foreclosures or any type of opportunities that come up. But I think with real estate investing or making any type of real estate purchase, you have to really map out, what's my 5-year goal? What's my 10-year goal? What's my 30-year goal? What type of exit strategies do I have? And what other investment vehicles that are outside of real estate that I'm not an expert on, could I diversify? I tell everybody, you kind of have to look at it like that. Because we don't know what's going to happen. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you brought up a lot of interesting points there. And it's funny that you talked about, I think earlier you talked about the, having a property on a 30-year note. And, yesterday I was on Instagram and I saw something, I think it may have been something popped up from Dave Ramsey, and he said, hey, don't get anything over a 15-month note. Could you maybe kind of describe, why using a 30-year note is maybe better in this case? Or?
Yeah, definitely. So when you're two different investors, if you're already wealthy and you're investing your own liquid capital, you try to leverage as much of that to buy as much cash flow. Right? If you're not so wealthy, but you have to save up money for a down, buy a property, save up money for a down, buy a property. What you really want to do is be able to create that cash on cash return, and you want to be able to spread that debt service over the longest period of time. Why? It builds you and buys you appreciation if you can hold on to it and manage it correctly. But it also allows you to do cash out refi if you're doing any value add to that property. And I see too many investors will pull short-term notes, and then it'll be like balloon payment panic. I have to shift it around, or I have to sell it, right? If you're really seasoned about this and you can do it correctly, especially if you're doing a lot of burrs, you need to be able to leverage as many cash flow sources as possible. And as you can spread those out on your 20-year, 30-year notes, you reduce the PITI or the debt service. It gives you the ability to raise rents and get that cash flow delta over a longer period of time. So really what I look at is you're not even equating with appreciation, right? That's just an added bonus. Tax shelter is just an added bonus. You're simply investing on cash flow. And I have a crazy statistic is my entire portfolio is owner financed.
Really?
Every single property. I don't have a single bank loan.
Huh.
And that has been done by crazy negotiation, right time, right place, and being able to show the benefits of owner financing to sellers, and being able to build 20-year, 30-year notes, and being able to lower my PITI, reposition, value add, throw the right tenants in there, start to cash flow. And where in my market, 100 a door to 200 a door is like a conservative, good number for most investors. I have enough in my portfolio now, which is equivalent to owning 40 doors. I own way less than that. I've cash flowed and positioned those notes the right proper way. So that's why I'm patient with my investing, where a lot of people just jump in, they start to buy, they overpay. And I try to tell all my investors, like, the more work you have to put into this property, the better. And when I hear somebody say, like, I don't know if I want to take that project on, or there seems like there's a lot of repairs here, or, you know, they have crappy tenants and we need to do a bunch of evictions and repositioning of the property management or a property management performance plan, I always say, those are your biggest reward properties, right? If you want things that are easy, then you better be wealthy so you can park your money, make consistent, steady returns. Versus if you really want to get into real estate investing, you got to get your hands dirty. You got to take on the risk. And when I bought my first property, my wife was like, you're absolutely crazy. You're like draining your checking account. And I was like, just give me 2 years, give me 3 years. And now she's like, whoa, checking account's way back, plus more every month. So it's one of those things where you just have to play your cards right. But I can't stress, as interest rates rise and your first time home buyers and pent up buyer demand start to fall off, then there'll be a resurgence in owner financing type properties, because the sellers are going to get more motivated to sell because they have high appreciation, high equity, but there's not this huge buyer pool that there used to be. And if they can get monthly cash flow, not be a landlord, and be able to agree upon a purchase price that's fair for both parties, that's really the problem that owner financing solves. And less origination fees, less points up front, and what I like to use the term, less financial interrogation, because there's a lot of wealthy people out there that probably could qualify for a loan from a local bank, but then they try to pull a loan from a bigger banking institution. Won't say any names here, but then they're like denied because of this, or this reason. And so I try to tell everybody, like, you should go into an investment deal, and the first question you should ask is, would you ever consider owner financing that on my terms and a price that you want? First question, every single time. And you'd be surprised if people are like, what is that? Or I've heard of that. Like, why would I do that? And then it opens a huge bucket of questions and curiosity, where if you just went in there and said, what's your price? No. Okay, cool. And the negotiation ends, you leave. You just spent 30 minutes driving there, and now you just lost money. So that's how I was taught and coached. Owner financing first, then what are your options? Is it an assignment of contract? Is it, pulling in a joint venture from a few partners so you can raise that liquidity and be able to buy that property with the right partners? Is it syndication? And then the bank literally is the last option. So sorry to any lenders out there. Sorry if you're a lender as well, but that's how I was trained as an investor.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it kind of seems contrary to maybe the mainstream way of going about things, but you're kind of suggesting there's more than one way to skin a cat, right?
Totally. And I think the reason for that is, and why I touch on this a lot, is that in our real estate residential side, a lot of deals are killed by two different types of people: attorneys and banks, lending, appraisals. And it's because you're borrowing somebody else's money to purchase that property. And I'm in a transaction right now that I'm waiting to hear back on an appraisal, right? And it changes the outcome. If it doesn't sell or doesn't pass appraisal, then I just put in like 50 hours of work and tons of paperwork for no reason to start over. Right. And so I'm not saying that's always the case, but I say if you, knowing your exit strategies or your acquisition strategies going into real estate investing or going into even buying real estate, your first home. Let me just touch on this real quick. If you're going to buy your very first home and the bank tells you, hey, we'll approve you up to 400,000, you should be looking at houses between 330 and 350. You should look at what that monthly payment is. You should look at how much money is in your bank account. And then you should look at, if I buy a property that's not turnkey, what could I do to add and raise value? And so many buyers right now are just looking at turnkey, move-in ready, overpay, bidding war, and they're buying a $400,000 house for 430, and they have no money in their bank left. If anything happens with their job, they're basically going to default and be in pre-foreclosure. And the house that was 275 or 3.25 had $100,000 of hidden equity that just needed to be released with 50,000 in remodeling. So that's what I've been really trying to teach my home buyers as they come into the process, that if you want to buy, max out your loan. I already disclaimered that, and I've given you my advice. But if you do it like I did, which is I got approved for X amount of dollars and I bought at like 60% of that, and then I started doing projects to that house, and then the bank's like, holy smokes, you have $150,000 in equity in 2 years. Because I did a slow flip. That's what I did. So I don't tell anybody this to just, I tell people this as advice, that you got to buy real estate like an investor would. Just because you're buying your first home or residential property, you're still a real estate investor. Simple as it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, that can definitely be a mindset shift for someone. Maybe they're a first-time home buyer, they're new to the process. You see yourself as a first-time home buyer, not a first-time real estate investor.
Yep. And I think that's been the message of why you would work with an investor agent to buy your first home, because that's the conversation that we're going to have. We're going to have a conversation if you come into me and my ecosystem is first establishing a relationship. Second, do you understand the process? Third, have you talked to a lender and what's your financial capabilities? And then fourth, let's look at this like a real estate investment. And that's my process. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it starts with relationship. Because if it's not a good relationship and you think agents are disposable, or it's just like a dime a dozen type of mentality, you'll never get to see my process or meet my lender. Because it's not a good start. It's not a good relationship. And you're not going to respect when we get to phase 4, when I start talking about treating it like a real estate investment now, because we never build a relationship. And I think a lot of people go for the commission. And I don't care who it is, I'm going to get them through the steps. And then it turns into not the best scenario in the end. So like I said, building clients for life should be every real estate agent and real estate investor's mentality. It should not be turn and burn. You should be growing your database, nurturing your database, because that's why a lot of people come to me for real estate marketing, is they're like, how do you successfully build, post-transaction touch plan and building, I hate using this term, but like a group of raving fans that want to refer you to other people. It's integrity, right? That knowledge, like he told me not to overbuy. He gave me his raw advice that really helped us understand that we were going in the wrong direction with other agents. So that's what I try to bring to the table.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's definitely a unique product compared to, just ending the transaction and letting it end there. Whereas for you, you're offering so much more.
Yeah. And I think with high performance real estate, and as you get to that 4 to 5 transaction a month milestone, you start to lose reality of it as a client focused business, and you start to look at it like a volume focused business. And then that's when you start building a team. That's when you start being detached from the buyer sequence. Now you're just a listing agent. Now you don't talk to buyers. Buyers are horrible. Buyers are time wasters. And I think that is ultimately just the balance in your business, that, how much money do you want to make? How many transactions do I need to do to fulfill that financial goal? And what is that mix of buyers and sellers? Because the one thing I try to tell from a real estate perspective is that you should never stop working with buyers. They are the carrot seeds that you're planting in your neighborhood or your farm that are going to turn into listings in 3 to 4 years once they have 2 kids and they want to move up or relocate from job change or any of that. A lot of listing agents right now in my own market, there's their top 1% that have, a consistent lead pool of sellers, but there's a lot of listing agents right now that are like panicking and they can't even find buyers. And all of that was neglecting buyers for a long period of time. So
Yeah, no, it's interesting that I met up with a friend here in South Austin, and he's an agent, and he had mentioned how he started out back in 2016, helping buyers agents, and now you fast forward 5 years, and you have a listing, right?
that's just that's just like the number one farming goal, is really to help buyers have a great experience and make them remember you and be loyal to you. And I think with real estate marketing, just like understanding your business and being able to know where to allocate your money to potentially attract those buyers. A lot of people jump on big platforms to just generate leads, but they're not building the brand or the audience. And I think that's the biggest disconnect. Like if I had $1 million to spend on marketing, Dan, what would you do? I wouldn't spend it on lead generation. I'd be small percentage of testing on lead generation and different platforms, but 100% on brand and local audience development, because those are the people that are going to trust you. They're going to relate to your content and they're going to call you when they're ready to do something. And that just happened to me. I had an Instagram lead come in that was like, hey man, I've been watching your videos for like 6 months. Like I had a bad experience with another real estate agent. Like I started watching your videos and I was like, whoa, this guy knows what he's talking about. And do you want to help us buy a house? And I was like, yeah, I have a slot for 2 buyers and you're one of them. Let's start looking. So that's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely huge. And it almost, I know it sounds cliche, but it almost sounds like kind of that instant gratification thing. A lot of times, building the brand isn't sexy because you're not getting an immediate return. Whereas for you, it sounds like you're playing the longer game.
100%. Like when me and my business partner paused, not 100% paused, but paused the real estate investing because prices went up. We're like, it's a seller's market. It's hard to find wholesale deals. It's hard to find flips. Let's move our transition into brokerage. We'll build a long-term model. We'll build a couple really good, reputable, profit-sharing buyers agents that could be equity partners. Let's build a framework of longevity and bringing more investment buyers to Oregon and working with us. And in the long term, we may not be profitable for the first few years, but in year 3, in year 5, in year 7, year 10, we're going to have a huge database of people that we've helped just by building that brand, building that audience and that expertise. I think that's the key, right? You can't look at instant gratification. And when you first get started in this business, like you're cold calling, you're like desperate to close deals. And I know a lot of people have that argument, like you shouldn't be a part-time agent. And when I went full-time, everything clicked and all this. I tell everybody, like, keep your day job until you've done 3 to 5 deals. And once you've started to build more of that transition, that's when it makes sense.
Absolutely, Dan. That makes a ton of sense. Well, is there anything you haven't said thus far that you'd really just like to hammer home for us?
No, I mean, I appreciate you having me on the show. Like anyone out there, follow me at Oregon Relocation Expert on Instagram, or you can go to www.theexitagents.com. We have a monthly newsletter that you can sign up on the top right-hand corner, where we drop knowledge about the Oregon market, what's going on here. And if you're interested in investing in the Pacific Northwest, I think more or less, we'd love to help you in your business and be able to guide you. If you're another agent out there who's looking at getting more advice on how to be more successful, build scalable systems for your real estate business, or you need, positioning and IDX websites that build actual brand, reach out to us at liftoffagent.com.
Yeah, definitely, Dan. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've spoken a bit about your background, working with, looking at valuations of properties, construction, maybe different market trends, and, how to build your brand, how to, basically just do more deals and the importance of working with a good agent. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience will too. And thank you again for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Aaron. Thanks so much, man.
Have a good one.
Too.